Okay. Juha, if you want to get started.
Sure, thanks, Mackenzie. So let's see if this works as well as just a moment ago. All right, I hope you're getting it. All right, thanks for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about the Snow Science Winter School, which we have been organizing in Europe for some time now. This is something probably very similar to what has been organized on the US side. And I guess the purpose of this seminar today is to introduce both of these school concepts to the same audience, and hopefully a lot of future students as well as possibly lecturers that could then attend either both or either of these schools. So first of all, just acknowledging a few colleagues, or actually quite many. So this is by no means my concept. This was something that was cooked up by Martin Schnebeli from SLF in Switzerland, the Swiss Avalanche Research and Forecasting Institute. And quite a few colleagues have along the years participated as lecturers in these snow schools. Some of them are listed here in the intro slide, but by no means everyone. But okay, so what is the snow school? In short, well, it's a 1-week field-oriented training course on snow measurements. And this involves both hands-on training, field work, lab work, and also science lectures. We have thus far organized this once per year, typically in February or March, in that time frame, and the location has changed a bit. We try to go to a little bit different location in Finland, Switzerland, and France. The school is aimed at graduate students and postdocs, although some undergraduate students have been attending, depending on their level of, let's say, level of expertise, level of interest. We'll get to that in a bit. We typically take in 25 students. Sometimes people have asked, why don't we take more? Because there has been quite a lot of demand, but this is sort of a practical limit in terms of accommodation at these field sites primarily, and also having a nice size of group that can still be handled easily. We typically have to support the school 5 to 8 lecturers or field instructors on a voluntary basis, so nobody gets paid. People do this out of their own free will. And this school corresponds to what we have in Europe is a European credit transfer and accumulation system. Means doesn't matter from which university you are, you can get these acknowledged as your study credits, at least in Europe. So in terms of the goals we have for the snow.
Can I just interject? I'm only seeing like your first slide. I don't know if you haven't switched to the presentation slide.
Oh no, really? Is the same for everyone?
Okay.
It looks like maybe you just haven't made it full screen yet.
Ah, right. I tried to ask that a little bit in the beginning, but
Sorry.
okay.
I think I was trying to say something and I was muted, but
better? Is it better?
it's not. It's the same.
It might be switching. Just maybe give it a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I did switch to fulls or switched between presenter mode and whatever.
Yeah, it hasn't come through yet. Let's see.
Oh no, worked very nicely just
I
previously.
think if you go to full screen, you need to share the full screen if you're just sharing one screen.
Right. Let's go again. Might be.
There we go.
Better, okay. So let me go back. If this goes back now even. Okay, so you see the snow school in a nutshell slide.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, now it should work then. Well, there is what I just said in the past couple of minutes, but I'll let this sink in for a while and go to the next one, which is the educational goals. So, well, the main goals are two. So developing understanding of the physical properties of the snowpack, and for next, teaching field techniques for snow quantification. So one of the main motivations was actually to enable a transition from these traditional snow profiles, which we still teach at these schools, to more, let's say, quantitative state-of-the-art measurements using various types of instruments. In addition to that, there has been typically a changing thematic goal to these schools, either focusing on alpine, tundra, boreal, or even a sea ice environment, depending on the site we are at. Or on some schools, we have focused on physical snow modeling or even snow remote sensing, and maybe some other themes as well in future schools. So in practice, what does this involve? Well, if you do get enrolled in the school, first you will get a pre-assignment, maybe 1 month before the school. Takes the form of a literature survey. Then there is typically 3 or 4 days of lectures and hands-on exercises. The field work typically takes place in small groups. And we have had thus far like one longer field work day in the form of a mini expedition that the students get to plan and then execute as they best can, again in these little groups. And lately we have introduced a wrap-up day with group presentations, which we have actually found quite useful. And then to get the credits, the students still have to deliver a written report, but they do this by groups that they are throughout most of this week. That's just as an example, a typical schedule from one of these schools in the past. Well, sort of long days from 8 to 7, but this is including dinners and lunches and breakfasts and so on. Typically, we have had lectures in the morning. Then on the first day, some classroom and outdoor practice with the instruments, maybe some icebreaker event in the evening. And then again, the next couple of days, lectures in the morning, then field practice or field experiments in the afternoon with wrap up at night. And then typically on the last day or the second last day, this longer field expedition lasting a whole day, plus then wrap up sessions and dinner event and so on. So this would be quite a typical schedule for the school. Just an examples of the field and laboratory techniques that are taught. So we do teach the traditional snow profile, these very manual types of measurements. And as said, this is done in small groups of maybe 3 to 4 students. Then we have had, there's just some examples of the instruments we have had in the field. So these snow micropenetrometers, we have taken casted samples of snow and demonstrated their analysis in the CT scanner. And we have had several different instruments for measuring, for example, the specific surface area of snow from near-infrared reflectance, both from these so-called ice cube devices, or NIR photography, for example. So far, we have had 7 schools. A couple were unfortunately cancelled due to COVID. So the first one was in Sodankylä in Finland, northern Finland. Then we went to Preda, Sodankylä again. Then the first school in France in Col du Lautaret in 2018. Then we had a sea ice school in preparation for the Mosaic campaign in 2019, again in France. Then unfortunately 21 and 22 schools were cancelled due to COVID. But this year we were happily able to organize a school in Davos in Switzerland. And there's just some photos in the top from the very first school, and in the bottom from Davos from this year. So sponsorship has been a very important part of this. So the reason this is now called the EGU Snow Science Winter School is that the EGU agreed kindly to sponsor the school for a longer term. At least I think 5 years was the agreement, with a certain sum. In addition to that, we have had many sponsors from European institutes, for example, the European Space Agency, the European Science Foundation, and then also international foundations, for example, the IASC and IAX, so International Association of Cryospheric Sciences and International Arctic Science Committee, and also many others, including also the institutes who have organized these as the main host. They have chipped in. So the purpose of this has been to lower the participation fee for students, but we still typically have to charge about 400 to 500 euros, I think almost the equivalent in US dollars. This covers lectures, training, accommodation, and so on, meals. But the students do typically have to provide for their own travel money from somewhere else. And we also don't provide field gear, for example, clothes, boots, and so on. And we typically ask for them to have an international health insurance as well. And well, how to apply for the school? Typically, the applicants have to fill in a web form, including personal information, reason for attendance, relevance for their research, publications and achievements, and also winter outdoor experience. And maybe the most important ones for selection are these their motivation for attending the school, and how do they actually benefit, what is the relevance for their present research. These are graded then, these applications, by a very eminent selection committee, and we do a student selection by the end of November typically. And well, at least this is the goal. Sometimes it has been a little bit delayed, and then confirmation payment has to happen by the end of December by the students. And typically we have gotten some like 60 to 7 applications for these 25 places, so it has been like a little bit competitive. Not everyone who has wanted to come has been able to do so. And well, just one of the reasons is well, good applications do justify well their reasoning for wanting to come, and then even some probably very talented people, they have maybe just thought that they don't need to put too much effort into this, and maybe this has been then apparent in the application, and they have not gotten enough points. So just to the end, a couple of nice pictures. So this is from the first school where we were in Finland, in a boreal and a tundra environment in 2015. The fourth school, this was the one that was the first time we were in the French Alps at Col de l'Oitaret, which is it's a very nice facility there in a beautiful alpine environment. The fifth one was special in the sense that this was organized to support the Mosaic expedition, this 1-year sea ice expedition that took place right during COVID, successfully, fortunately. So this was training for snow measurements on sea ice, specifically in quite harsh conditions sometimes. And then this year was the first year after COVID that we were able to organize the school. We went to Davos in Switzerland, and enjoy the great alpine views again, snow work, and even some brewery tours, for example. And as a pre-advertisement, then the next EGU Snow Science Winter School will take place again in Sodankylä in Finland, northern Finland. Applications will open in October 2023, and at least we'll advertise on Cryolist and possibly also on the SINTER mailing list then, and other avenues. But all right, that is all I wanted to say quickly about these European schools. Sorry for the technical glitch in the beginning, but happy to take any questions.
Why don't we go through, I'll go through the US Snow School and then we can take questions together at the end. How does that sound?
Yep, sounds great.
Great.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay, what screen does this look?
Looks like your non-presentation mode screen. See the slide, but not
let me try again.
in presentation.
There you go, Mackenzie.
Great. Okay. So this will cover the Kuwazi and SINTER snow measurement field school. And similarly, there are a lot of people involved in the snow school. And I just want to recognize current and previous instructors for all the work that they have done organizing this, and all the work that they've done into creating curriculums. This picture is from the 2019 snow school in Bozeman, and that was my first year as an instructor. So I came into the legacy of snow school, and there's probably some more background that I don't know since I've only been involved since 2019, but I'll do my best to summarize snow school in its current iteration. So the motivation for our snow school is similar to, but maybe even slightly higher level than the EGU snow school. So it's obviously snowpack measurements are critical and needed for a number of purposes, including for modeling and remote sensing. And there's really kind of two basic reasons that someone needs to know how to make snow measurements. Either they're going to be using it in their own research or operations, or they're going to be using data collected by others to validate or assess their model or remote sensing retrievals, and need to be able to understand what goes into those observations. So the course is aimed at a whole range of potential participants, including graduate students, postdocs, professionals, and senior scientists. Could include modelers and remote sensors that will make snow measurements as a part of their research or use snow data in their research. And when we're assessing who to accept, priority is given to graduate students and early career researchers, although undergraduates can participate if there's availability. There's no required prerequisites to attend, but of course it's spent, most of the day is spent out in the snow during snow school. So being able to spend days outside, being active in the snow is important. Okay, so logistically, it's typically held in early January. That's the timeframe that we've sort of decided on as being easiest for the most people to attend. There's been deviations from that, but this upcoming year, I think we'll return to this early January period, and there's 4 days of on-site instruction. So a typical snow school week might look like arriving on Sunday, and then snow school is held Monday through Thursday, and then departure would be on Friday morning. And the meals, lodging, and transportation are all included in the registration costs. There's been some fluctuation in the number of students, instructors, and TAs, but generally speaking, it's 20 to 30 students, 4 to 5 instructors, and 1 to 2 TAs to help support student learning. The organization and support for Snow School comes from Kawazi, who facilitates, supports, and organizes Snow School. So Kawazi is an organization, a consortium of universities for hydrologic learning and gaining skills. And so they facilitate a number of workshops, learning opportunities, grants. They're a great resource to have. And so they do all of the organization. They book the lodging, they facilitate the travel. The application is done through their website. So they're organizing everything. SINTER is in charge in terms of the curriculum and choosing the locations for the snow school, and then also determining who the instructors will be. And we try to rotate through instructors so we get a wide range of expertise. And so we try to have, in any given year, different expertise represented within the instructor pool, including, for example, somebody who does radar and somebody who does optical remote sensing, so that we can meet the needs of the students who are interested in learning different aspects. And then NASA provides support for purchasing the equipment that's used and for travel grants to offset travel costs to Snow School. The application is, like I mentioned, done through the Kawazi website, and it's really important. Every year we get questions about, I missed the application deadline. Can I put an application? We get enough applications similar to the EGU Snow School that we get more applications than there are spots. So no late applications are accepted. So if you or your students or you have colleagues who are interested in going or applying, just keep an eye on when those applications are due. Typically, the applications open in late summer, early fall. And this is kind of a challenging time because, especially for graduate students, it tends to be before fall semester starts. So if you have an incoming student that is not yet started yet, but you know that they might be interested in Snow School, they might need to know ahead of their official start date for graduate school. Notifications of acceptance happen in late fall, and then the school is held in early January. So the questions on the application are also just basic information and what's the role of the applicant. So if they're a graduate student, postdoc, or professional, what their background in snow is, why do they want to attend, and how often will they be using snow measurements in their future endeavors, and then how they would describe the primary role of snow measurements in their future endeavors. So those last 2 questions are the most important questions. And when we are ranking applications, all of the instructors go through and read the responses and rank from 1 to 5. And then the highest ranked students will get selected for admittance to Snow School. So I do suggest similarly that students spend time answering this and think about, how they're going to be using snow measurements, because if they just say something, like, I think snow is interesting, I've always loved snow, that's not enough information for us to rank them to truly understand if they are going to benefit from Snow School. And it is unfortunate in the past, I think have been applicants that probably would have benefited from snow school, but didn't take the time on their application to answer these questions thoroughly and then didn't get admitted. Okay, so locations previously in the past, it's been held in Fraser, Colorado, Bozeman, Montana, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and then a couple years where we were online for COVID. And then this year it was in Heber, Utah. And then next year we're going back to Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. And we have chosen this sort of dynamic siting so that students can experience different snow environments, different resources and facilities, and then increased accessibility for students, say, on the West versus East Coast of the US. The plan in the future is to alternate sort of back and forth between the East and the West so that students who are interested in snow on the East Coast don't always have to come out West and vice versa. So if you are in the East or West, just know that it will rotate back into your area in the future if you don't want to send your students or if you don't want to come out West for travel. Okay, so the curriculum for snow school assumes little prior knowledge and experience on the part of the students. So we're sort of assuming that they are beginners in terms of snow measurements. And we put a lot of stress, especially early on in snow school, on field and snow safety, and then progresses to simple but critical depth, density, and snow water equivalent. Students are sort of divided up into teams and paired with an instructor each day, and then tasked with making field measurements that simulate what would be required in an actual field campaign. So they get a lot of hands-on practice with all of these critical measurements. And accordingly, almost all day is spent outside in the snow. So that could be from 10 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And it's supplemented by lectures, typically in the morning, and then data tutorials after they get back from the field. So that could be, something like calculating SWE from their snow pit measurements, visualizing snow pit profiles, or posting to open access data sites to share their information with the community. Okay, so the learning objectives are hopefully by the end of snow school, the students should be able to feel confident, be able to do it and feel confident about it, to excavate and prepare a snow pit, to characterize stratigraphy, measure and record profiles of density, snow temperature, snow grain type and size and hardness. Use a federal sampler, a SODEF probe, SWE tube, and other measurement techniques to capture spatial variability. So make measurements along a transect, and then design their own experiment for sampling snow based on specific scientific objectives and understand the strengths and limitations of the data that they're collecting. So here's the general agenda overview. Like I mentioned, there's a travel day first. When they first arrive, there's usually a field safety lecture and discussion. Day one is snow pits, where we're really focusing on stratigraphy and snow water equivalent across that vertical snow profile. Day two is transects, capturing spatial variability across the landscape. Day three is specialized in advanced measurement techniques, and I'll give some examples of what we've done in the past. And then day four is the mini field campaign, where students group themselves up and as a group design a campaign in order to observe something or test a hypothesis. Okay, so a little more detail about each of these days. So in the snow pits, we really focus on those vertical profiles and snow characterization before they go out to the snow pits. In the morning, there's a lecture about the basic properties, snow grain size, snow density, what makes up stratigraphy, and then they go out and they look at it themselves. So they're observing and recording number of layers, layer thickness, layer density, layer temperature, grain type, hand hardness, and then of course any special layers like dust or ice crusts. Guaranteed to leave from snow school being very happy about your density cuts, like all of these students here. Lots of practice with the density profiles. These all show the larger cutters, but we do density cutters of multiple sizes, so they get to practice with the smaller 200cc cutter and the square cutter, because depending on where you are observing snow, you might be using a different type of density measurement device. Okay, and then day 2 is the depth and SWE transects. So this is using a snow depth probe and a federal sampler to characterize spatial variability. And this one, this was an interesting case on the East Coast, where a pretty heavily wooded environment where students got to sort of figure out what the best sampling scheme was to capture variability across this landscape. So we could, in the past, we've also had magnet probes available for depth measurements, and which is always nice for students to gain experience with those. But the general focus is on the basic measurements, depth and SWE. For advanced measurement techniques, we have had a range of different types of measurement techniques, and this usually depends upon the instructor pool that is teaching in that year. So I just have some pictures here of examples of what we've done in the past. On the left here is a field spectrometer for reflectance and albedo measurements, a thermal camera, a snow micropenetrometer, an ice cube. This year I had the LiDAR drone out, which was a big hit. But we also usually fly drones with RGB cameras for photogrammetry. Liquid water content, snow wetness measurements. And then another special one this year, Eli Deeb and Rick Forster came out with the car SAR, and students got to look at some data collected around the site in Utah. So this can change from year to year, like I said, depending upon the instructor pool. And generally, we will try to tell students before they're coming what these specialty techniques will be for this third day, just because it changes from year to year. Okay, and then the mini field campaign, students get time to group up and discuss what kind of measurements they might want to tackle on this day and what their hypothesis or science question or objective is. So they get time to plan it out ahead of time and then implement it for most of the day. On Thursday, they go out and instructors will sort of move around between groups and answer questions, but for the most part, students are in charge of collecting their own observations. And just as an example of some of the projects that have been done in the past would be mapping snow depth or snow surface elevations with photogrammetry, and then calculating depth and comparing that to magnet probe measurements. This last year, there was a characterization of snow pit volume done from photogrammetry. There was an albedo test with, I think the initial idea was going to be with dirt, but the ultimately ended up being coffee grounds, and measuring change in albedo after coffee grounds were deposited at the surface, and doing a time series of throughout the day. There's another one where they are characterizing variability in snow processes or snow properties along a transect moving away from a tree. Other ones have been characterizing variability around a snowtell site. There's really been a wide range in projects, and students have been quite creative when coming up with their ideas. And then they get to come back inside, analyze their data, and put together a presentation that they get to present to their peers. And that's sort of the wrap up of Snow School. And then depending on the year and the location, there's typically also instrumentation visits or site visits. In Bozeman, Montana, we got to go to the Sub-Zero Research Laboratory at MSU. This last year in Utah, we were right next to a snowtail site, so we got to visit the snowtail site. When we were in New Hampshire, we got to go to an experimental forest and see some of their instrumentation. So this is also depending upon location and instructor availability or availability of people nearby and the willingness to show off some stuff. And here's just some fun pictures from Snow School. And if there's any questions that don't get answered here today, questions can either come to me or general center email address, and we will get them answered. Okay, so now I think we can open up the floor for questions for either one of us.
I have a question. Hi.
Go ahead, Anne.
Great presentations. Man, I wish there was a Snow School when I was a grad student. It's just so awesome seeing all this. And I put something in the chat. I love that you use coffee grounds to modify the albedo. I'm sure there's a story behind that. But one of the things I was wondering about is I've got a couple of students coming in the next couple of years, and they don't really have, they have a lot of interest, but they don't have like gear for doing snow science. And I'm wondering if there's sort of like a lending library for gear for students who might be not, in that socioeconomic class where we buy lots of good gear or somehow inherit it. I was just wondering if there's an opportunity for like a gear library or something.
That's a great question. If a student wants to attend the US Snow School and doesn't have the gear, they can contact the instructors, and we are happy to figure out getting them the gear they need. And then what we are figuring out is that there are certain locations, like the location that we go to in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, is an Appalachian Mountain Club lodge, and they actually have gear at the lodge that they check out and lend. And we are now specifically looking for locations like that, where it provides the access to gear that students need.
Yeah, for the European school, we actually get this same question a lot also, and many times people do show up without adequate gear, despite us giving out a thorough packing list. So even though we still try to emphasize that people need to have their own gear, but in some cases we have then been able to provide, let's say, additional gear, warm boots, warm hats, so on, for people who don't have them. So, but we still wouldn't like to put this out as a thing that we provide, because we cannot do it for everyone at the moment, unfortunately.
Right.
But some sort of gear library gear storage would be a good idea. Doesn't have to include all the 25, but
right.
Some. Yeah, nice idea.
Okay. Yeah, I want people to feel included, so that, because it's tricky if you show up with weird gear or just not right, if your feet get cold, you just can't do anything, Thanks.
Just following on to that, what is like the main things of gear that people need? We also, our lab just kind of recently stumbled upon more snowpack measurement type stuff, and we're thinking about what to acquire.
Yeah, that's a good question. I probably should have put we do send out like a packing list essentially to everybody, and I should have included that in the presentation, but what we expect students to show up with is just warm clothing. So good boots, hats, gloves, snow pants, just the stuff that they need to stay warm. And then we provide all the equipment that they're going to be using in the field. And if there is an opportunity where they might need something like snowshoes or skis, we will tell them that, but we don't make it a requirement because we know it can be hard to travel with and not all students have that. But we do say, like, maybe on that, that day where you're designing your own field campaign, you might get a chance to go out and ski a little bit farther, or go a little bit farther, but we don't make that a requirement of attendance.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and it's been the same for us. So I would say warm boots, snow pants, warm jacket, good hat, good gloves, and that gets you far enough. All the other instruments and so on are provided.
I'll say that in my experience, the warm boots thing means such different things to different people. On some of my snow hydrology class field trips, I've had students show up in Converse, high-top Converse sneakers. And they're like, oh no, this is fine. I wear these, even on cold days. I'm like, okay, well, good luck with the snowshoes and those. So it's really tough for people to understand what warm boots mean. And a lot of folks, especially like people living here in Reno, for instance, wouldn't necessarily have boots that are appropriate for snowshoeing or whatever. Like warm boots just means something you'd wear around town or something. But it's really tough, and warm boots are expensive.
Yeah, and we do, at least in the packing list, we make clear what type of boots are expected, and then we also provide basically like a thermal pads that we can put down in the snow pits for them to stand on, which helps their feet from getting cold. And yeah, I just wanted to, there's a question in the chat from Claire. How far in advance would we know what year-to-year varying objectives and techniques will be covered, which might impact interest and how relevant the curriculum is? So from the US side, when we post the applications on the COASI website, we also post who the instructors will be for that year. And the first 2 days are always the same. The only thing that would vary is that advanced or specialty techniques for the third day. And we try to post that with the instructor so students will know what's going to be covered in that year.
Yeah, for the European school, it's practically the same. So the exact curriculum, well, depends on the location and on the lecturers we get for that particular year, their personal interests. So I would say that we know the curriculum more or less, or the focus point, when we post out the advert in the fall. So you would know when you see the call for the snow school applications, but not like several years in advance, unfortunately.
Mackenzie, for these newer approaches, are you and UHA coordinating across the pond to make sure that students are getting the same instruction? Kelly Elder, who you should probably all thank, because Kelly was the one who went over to Europe and realized that we had a problem, that we and the Europeans weren't doing certain things the same way. So I just want to make sure that especially as new techniques come online, that you guys are continuing to kind of cross-calibrate, for all the reasons that we have the snow school.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And that is part of what SINTER is trying to do, is make sure that we keep in touch about the sort of curriculum between the two snow schools. And ideally before COVID, we were maybe planning this a little bit better, but exchanging instructors so that we could have, like, Nick Rudder come and teach part of the snow school here, and then vice versa, Jessica Lundquist went over to Europe. So that is probably something we need to spend a little more time implementing, but it's a great point. And SINTER is great for that, for making sure that one of our charges is to increase collaboration between the different communities.
Yeah, I agree, especially this, well, continuing to exchange instructors would be very useful. At least, well, would be great to have one instructor from the US side every time, or from elsewhere in the European school, so it's not all in-house Europe stuff. But there's been reasonable attendance. Even in the first school, we had a couple of people from the US and Canada also. So hopefully this will continue.
Yeah, and I don't know if Kelly wants to chime in at all, because he is really, yeah, he's the reason why the snow school started in the US. If I missed anything, you can chime in at any time, Kelly.
You guys have done a great job. I think there's nothing I can add. I guess the other thing I would say that we've always tried to do in selection too from day one in this is really work on diversity and trying to get underserved and underrepresented populations and genders and whatnot in the school. And we've done that with mixed success, but it's always been a high priority in the student selection. And we're starting to see a slow shift in the field. So that's a small and not fully realized progress and victory.
Mhm. Thanks, Kelly, for that observation. I really appreciate it. One of the things that here at UNR, we have these URGE pods. It's Unlearning Racism in Geosciences. And one of the things that's come out of our URGE pod is the need for people to feel comfortable in the field, that a lot of times if you don't actually have that experience, it's kind of scary to go out into the snow. And so having that gear and having like a mentor or a buddy, to sort of help and not just that morning when you're getting your clothes on, but like just sort of helping you prep. And I don't know how that might work with any of these snow schools, but I will say that sending out a gear list is the absolute minimum, but that doesn't necessarily help people feel comfortable. And just in my very limited experience, I'm just speaking for myself, that my students look at that and get intimidated and think, oh my God, this is going to cost so much, and I really don't have the money for it. So as a professor, I provide them with a $200 reimbursement, and just, if they need something more, but at least it'll help them buy a good pair of boots. And so that's been an issue for students, even students who aren't underrepresented minorities, but like just students who just don't have very much money. So it's really tricky. Like this year in Alaska, it was cold and everybody needed like the big jacket and the big boots, which isn't necessarily the same as what we would be using here in the Sierras. So it is really site dependent, but my point being that the students are often uncomfortable when they just get a gear list, because to them, it just looks like a bunch of dollar signs.
Another question from Megan in the chat. Is there a repository to showcase group projects and/or snow school summary report from each year? If not, is that something you could consider adding? I think that is a great idea. Something that we do internally is that we get feedback from students who attend every year the snow school, do a survey and get feedback and try to incorporate that feedback, especially if they have useful suggestions for improvement. But we don't do something, sort of a report out to the broader community. I don't know if you guys do that for the EGU snow school.
Not really. We do have to report to some of the sponsors what we did with their money. So in some form we do prepare a report. So might actually be a very good idea to post this somewhere for the broader community, not just the sponsors. So definitely that could be a consideration. Also would promote maybe future snow schools and increase interest.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, Megan. Like, thanks for recommending it. And then it's a good question, Jared, if we're presenting at the Kwasi meeting, and I am not presenting, but I will talk to Kwasi to see if we can get someone to present on Snow School.
Let me know how I can help. I'm one of the quasi-biennial organizers.
Great, thanks, Anne. Yeah, so Nick was mentioning that they had students from all over the world in Davos this past year, and I will say that we also had students from all over the world at the one in Utah. So I think we really, in the future, and part of the reason why we decided to do this today is in the future is to, encourage students to apply to the school that maybe best fits their timing or their needs. So if you're in the US, you don't necessarily have to go to the US Snow School. You could apply potentially to the EGU Snow School, and there might be some funding considerations or something that, of course, that goes along with that, but they're both great opportunities for students all over the place. Okay, any final questions? We're coming up on the hour here. Great. Well, thank you everybody for attending. And this will get posted to the SINTER website. So if you know someone who wanted to attend but couldn't, please point them to our website and we'll get that posted as soon as we can. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.